Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We ask you move as far into the row as possible to make space for other guests. Our program is about to begin.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the the Great Depression, passed the a tariff bill the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Morris Pearl. I'm a former managing director at BlackRock. We want to pay higher taxes, and everyone else wants to pay higher taxes as well.
Hi, Steve Moore here. I'm here at the Patriotic Millionaires press conference where a bunch of millionaires said they want to pay higher taxes and they're advocating for it, but they won't sign a pledge saying they're willing to pay the taxes that they endorse. In fact, not one of these patriotic millionaires raised their hand and said, I'm willing to pay more taxes voluntarily.
Welcome to Tax Day, one of the most segregated, most unequal, and one of the most unjust days of the year in America.
It's about billionaires owning super yachts and Rolexes, while hardworking people are struggling to afford their rent or going to sleep hungry.
The poor and the working class are not going to bring this country down. It's the wealthy that'll bring the country down.
It's time to enact a new tax code that requires those who benefited the most from America's economic structure to recycle a significant portion of that benefit back into our society, rather than allowing them to amass fortunes so large that they threaten our democracy.
Hi, thank you, by the way, for doing this, and it's incredibly patriotic what you're talking about in terms of being willing to pay more taxes. I think, Myron, you started out this press conference by saying you want to pay more taxes. And so I represent a group called the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, and we have these pledges. How many of you are millionaires here? I know you are, a number of you. We're hoping that each one of you will sign this pledge, which says that you will pay a 90% tax, just as you're endorsing today, because you say it's your patriotic duty to do so. And so I'm hoping that each one of you will sign this pledge that says I'm willing to pay a 90% tax, because it's your, as you said, it's your patriotic.
So let me understand,
it's
you want me to do that individually, or you want me to do it
Miss Disney.
policy?
Yeah, let's get people, I've got pens, let's sign these, you know, that you'll, so we can solve the problem.
Policy, or do you want me to do it?
No, we want, you all said that you wanted to pay, you said you wanted to pay more taxes.
We want to change the system.
No, you said you want to pay more taxes, so don't you think it's your duty?
Can we keep this to press?
I'm sorry, don't you think it's your patriotic duty to pay more taxes if you're saying that?
Saying that the voluntary paying of more is not going to happen.
But you all are
Yeah,
millionaires.
sorry, we
right?
got another question.
Okay, I'm just, because you guys are millionaires, and you're saying you don't want to pay more. Wait, you do or you don't want to pay more taxes? What?
Yes, it's disingenuous to say
Why?
that the voluntary change to the law is going to make a structural difference.
But you could make, you all could make a huge difference. There's a little bit of hypocrisy when a bunch of millionaires get together and say raise taxes, but they're not willing to pay them themselves. Out of the 20 millionaires here, not one of them was willing to pay more taxes.
I deserve a good education.
At just 6 years old, my daughter was falling behind in school. The traditional school system just couldn't meet her needs. But then we found an ESA program. It unlocked a world of opportunity and it helped her thrive.
I love my school.
ESAs are the only option for my daughter to get the best education. But now the governor wants to take this away from my daughter and so many other children.
Governor Hobbs, please don't take away my school.
They said his election in 2016 was illegitimate. They concocted the Russia collusion hoax. They said his economic plan would cause a Great Depression. They went after his family. They want to put him in jail for 400 years. They tried to impeach him 5 times. They rigged a trial in New York. He even survived an assassination attempt. Donald J. Trump is indestructible. President Donald J. Trump, it's good to have you back.
Well, welcome, Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation. How about a round of applause for one of the greatest patriots ever, Steve Moore. Look, welcome to Heritage, where we're trying to figure out how to squeeze 250,000 people into a building that holds 700. And the reason we're doing that is, in addition to Steve's great organization and a lot of organizations represented here, we are America's outpost behind enemy lines. And so thanks for being here. We're T-minus 20 hours from taking back the greatest country known to man. God bless Donald Trump for surviving those assassination attempts and surviving the most unjust, ridiculous persecution against a political leader in modern history. It'll be great to hear from all of our speakers. We're really gratified that Senator Paul, Senator Johnson are here among our other VIPs, Dr. Laffer, from whom I've learned a lot, and of course, Steve Moore himself, Larry Kudlow, who's on the way. All of you are just as important. The one thing I'll lead you with before getting out of the way is that elections matter because public policy matters, but sure, you can applaud for that. When each of us goes back to our respective roles on Tuesday morning, maybe a little bit later on Tuesday morning, depending on how tomorrow goes, let us remember that what really keeps America, America is what we do in our individual lives, in our families, in our communities, building our businesses, building our churches, reclaiming the civil society that the last 4-year regime tried to take from us. Let us be encouraged today with the substance, but also let us be encouraged by everyday Americans who said on November 5th they had enough and they want to wake up tomorrow in a normal country. God bless you and have fun.
Just, by the way, I don't know Kevin Roberts. I've never heard of Project 2025. I like to tease him about that. By the way, I helped write the tax chapter of Project 2025, and that is a great report, Kevin. You should be so proud of that blueprint for how we can create a free market conservative agenda for the movement. So come on up. We have Rand Paul, and we have Senator Ron Johnson and Arthur Laffer. Come on up, Arthur. And so please sit down. We're going to start. By the way, this is, we want this to be fun. We want it to be educational. We want it to be participatory. We're going to kind of make it up as we go along because the weather is crazy out there. Some people are showing up. Some people can't make it across town. But we appreciate you guys braving the weather and getting here. So I wanted to start by asking Rand Paul to say a few words about your economic outlook, about Senator, how important it is that we get this budget under control. You have been, you and Ron Johnson have been the two people who have been the guiding light in terms of fiscal conservatism. So why don't you start us off in terms of, what you think should be the top priority for this administration?
Well, they asked me how much time I would need, and I one time spoke for 12 hours and 52 minutes.
You did. No filibustering here, Senator.
And so, no, I said I can get to the point much quicker. At 2 hours and 45 minutes, I become electrifying. So it takes me a little while. It's a kind of a crescendo. It takes me a little while. No, then Steve said you got 5 minutes, so all right. But no, we met with the president today, the Republican caucus, and the guy is indefatigable. I got to tell you, the energy. He spoke to us for 2 hours. He's, I think, at a rally now. He's going to probably speak for another 2 hours. He's unstoppable. I mean, they tried to shoot him. They've tried to put him in jail. He is incredible. I'm excited about a lot of the things. I'm excited about a lot of the nominees that have come forward. Big fan of Tulsi Gabbard. Big fan of Kash Patel. Big fan of Robert Kennedy. Even huger fan of Jay Bhattacharya and Marty Makary, two physicians. And really, almost all of them. I mean, these are people I would have picked. I mean, these are good people. And Ron and I are working to get them through. We did Kristi Noem's hearing the other day, and the Democrats were relatively passive with her. I think she's going to get Democrat votes. And the reason is I think they know they got their butt kicked in the election because the border's wide open. So they're going to vote for who Trump puts in charge of the border. So I think she could get 85, 90 votes is what I think. We did Russ Vogt's hearing. We think he's great. The Democrats, not so much. I think Russ will get through, but it'll be closer to a party line vote. Those are the two that we've done so far. And I think on Monday, they'll probably vote on Rubio, who will win overwhelmingly. And so far, I haven't heard any word of them allowing anybody else to be voted on Monday, maybe CIA on Monday. As far as the overall outlook, I love so many things about Donald Trump, but there are some things I think that we have to watch as we move forward. I think that tariffs and sanctions are of value when you threaten people with them, and they're of value when you offer to remove them for something. You actually put them on, they're simply a tax, and like any other tax, not good for trade, not good for the economy, and really won't be a benefit. When you look at trade and you say, well, you know, he thinks it's us against them. Trade's really who you trade with. It's you selling something to somebody else. It isn't one country selling to another. If we think of a trade deficit, people are like concerned, and the president thinks that we've been ripped off by 800 billion or 200 billion or 100 billion here, this and that. It would be the same as me telling you that, you know, I go to the Giant food store every week and I have a $50,000 trade deficit with the Giant food store. They never buy anything from me. I don't get anything. All I do is give them money. It's one-sided, but it makes no sense. Every trade that is voluntary is mutually beneficial. If I have $100 and I'm going to go buy a chair, I want the chair more than the $100. They want my $100 more than the chair. We actually both think we won when we're done with the trade. It's the same with countries and trade between countries. But what's incredibly important about this, and I don't say this to be mean to Donald Trump. Donald Trump won a great election. I'm for him. I'm going to support him on so many things. But on this, it's important that we know that the exponential growth of prosperity in our country is related to trade, capitalism, freedom, and the extension of the division of labor worldwide. That's how we became rich. When everybody made their own shoes, and you had to make your shoes and your clothes and grow your crops and gather the water and tend the cows, we didn't get anywhere. Nobody had time to think. Nobody had time to think and innovate and create all the things that happened. We have to reemphasize that. A decade ago, in every economics department, whether you're Republican or Democrat, everybody knew that trade was the answer and that trade created prosperity. There's a group, humanprogress.org, Marian Tupy, who writes about the advantages of trade. And there's this chart that has been put forward, and Jonathan Haidt called it the most important graph in history. And it's a graph of GDP per capita. And what it shows is, you know, 1820, everything's down here in utter despair and poverty. It does this. But then we get to World War II, and then we extend trade worldwide. We have a general agreement on tariffs, and trade goes through the roof. But so does prosperity. It's enormous. It's amazing. And if you count things in how many hours it takes you to get something, it was like 27 hours of work to get a refrigerator for an average worker in the 50s, and now it's like 3 or 4 hours. I mean, it's amazing. Food is down to like 10 seconds worth of work to buy food, clothing. All of that's because of international trade, so we shouldn't give that up. It doesn't mean we give a free pass to other countries. Look, I read a book about the problems of China and what they did with the pandemic. But it doesn't mean I don't want to end trade with China. I want to end giving them money. Let's end giving them privileges and money, but let's continue trade. That's my main message. I have 2 more hours, but Steve's looking at me funny. So.
Well, I love your message, Senator. Thank you. By the way, there's so many amazing people in this room, and again, I want to thank people for coming. I see my buddy Michael Falkender is here. He will be the I don't know exactly your title, but the #2 person at Treasury. So we're so proud of him. And not to put too much weight on your shoulder, but Michael, you got to get that tax cut done. All right, that's #1 agenda. So we're proud of him. I see that my friend Jeannie Allen. Jeannie, where are you? Jeannie Allen, who's running the school choice movement all over the country, one of the most important issues in the nation. So Jeannie. I see Ambassador Charlie Glazer is here. Charlie, thanks for coming. So many, many others, and so thank you all for being here. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you, Senator Johnson, but I want, if I may, have Arthur respond a little bit to what Rand Paul said. Do you agree with all of it, 60% of it, 40% of it, 20% of it? Did he get it right?
100%.
100%. Okay.
But let me just say that I do think it's a misinterpretation not to think of Donald Trump as a free trader.
Oh, okay.
I think I think he uses
How
this.
so?
Well, I think this is the only tool he has to go against mercantilists, to get Japan or some of these other countries to lower their tariffs and their quotas and their non-tariff barriers hurt them as well as us. But they don't give a damn. They're mercantilists totally on this process, and the only thing they care about is access to the U.S. market. That's all they care about. And when I had a conversation, he said, therefore, I'm going to threaten them with access to the U.S. market so they come to me and negotiate a more free trade, that they'll get rid of some of their tariffs. If you look at the 5 trade deals he's done, they did one with Japan, with South Korea, USMCA, with Brazil, and with Bolivia, I think it was. And all 5 of those trade deals lowered tariffs and lowered barriers. And each one of those, he used the threats of that. Now, threats are not part of economic logic in any textbook. I don't see a big threat section there. But they are part of real life. And they're not part of my life. I have no idea about threats. I'm a wuss from the beginning. I roll up in a ball, I start crying, I wet myself, and I climb under the bed. But he is not a wuss. And he does know how to use this as threats. And, when we were talking about this, he said, I am a free trader, and anyone who is CEO of a major international company is a free trader. They all are. Every international business person who does that. And I sort of added a little comment to him, and I think I shouldn't have, but I said, yes, sir. I mean, that's true. Any CEO of an international company is a free trader. That's true. And also, anyone who imports 2 foreign wives, you got to be a free trader, too. He did not laugh at that, no. And I got scared, and I rolled up in a ball and wet myself and climbed up. But that's the only thing I'd say about this. Rand is totally right on every comment he made, period. Well, the threat, the issue is Trump using these tariffs? And if he is, he can't tell you. I mean, your pushback can't be your fallback. And if you give the fallback position out, you lose all the leverage. So that's where.
But all I would say is we need to hope that we aren't successful having a 25% tariff on all trade with Mexico and Canada. If you have that, was that a good idea or a bad idea?
Let me just say this about that, if I can. You look at deeds, not words. And it's what is it? Something walks and money talks. What is that first one? That was that masculine bovine defecation. That's my Yale background coming out in me there. But I could have done it in Greek, but that would have been my Oxford background. But I do want you to distinguish very sharply, and we will judge him for the results. And all presidents are judged for their results. But I do believe Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing on trade, and I do believe he's totally a free trader, and that's true. Now, there is a little thing we did have a tax there prior to 1913 on trade that was the funding of the U.S. federal government, that and land sales and whiskey taxes, which I was really irritated at the whiskey taxes.
Personal income tax for a small tariff.
Thank you. That's all. You said that. I'm done. You're completely right. Thank you. That is
what
a
meeting of the minds.
But I want him to. I want Rand to be feisty. He lives only a few miles away from me in Bowling Green, and he's the best senator around. I mean, except for Ron Johnson. Thanks, sir. But seriously, Rand Paul is as great as they come, and his dad is spectacular as too. Ron Paul, if you know Ron Paul, and it's just great. And I just want to give him a shot at how his negotiations straight. I think he did pretty well with the hostages today. I don't know if you did that. That's called negotiation. He reminds me so damn much of Reagan. It makes me sick almost. I mean, we come into the office, he's taken the oath of office there, and they release the hostages out of Iran. Reagan was shot at too. I mean, the one thing I can tell you is my professional judgment of Donald Trump, and anyone here questions my love of Reagan, you go jump. But I think in the first term, Donald Trump was the single best president on economics. Now, I just talk about economics in U.S. history, to be honest with you. Now, he's got a real...
agree with you, Arthur Laffer, on that.
And let me just...
I still think Reagan had a better first term.
No, not a better first term. No, he didn't have a better first term.
Great.
He had a better second term. The 86 Tax Act was spectacular. And, you know, NAFTA, all that was just really, really wonderful. But the first term, I think Donald Trump exceeded Ronald Reagan. But it was close. But Trump's got his work cut out for him in this next term.
I'm going to turn it over to Ron Johnson in a minute, but I just want to press you on both of you on one point on this trade thing, and this is going to come up a lot in our discussion over the next hour or so. But if I understand Arthur's point, and if I understand sort of what Trump is trying to do, and Rand, I want your kind of reaction to this. An optimal world would be where nobody imposes tariffs on anybody, right? Wouldn't that be the best of all outcomes?
Yeah, the only thing I would respond is we have a mistake.
Well, hold on. Let me just finish my point.
Okay.
Let me finish my point. So, if Trump can use these threats of tariffs to get other countries to reduce their tariffs, isn't that a sound strategy? I guess that's what I was asking.
I don't disagree.
Sure.
If we're talking about threats and they're threats and they achieve results, I'm all for them. But we have to be a little bit careful if we say to ourselves, well, China doesn't allow cars, so we're not allowing cars, or Japan's not allowing as many, so we're going to, the idea of reciprocal sounds fair, but the thing is what we're being given, even if they subsidize theirs, is everything you get that is less expensive than if you bought it domestically is extra money you have to buy this stuff. You're richer. Absolutely. And we also have to be careful because things like TikTok, I hear this from conservatives. They're like, well, the Chinese ban it. We should ban it too. And it's like, well, no, that's because the Chinese are authoritarians. We're not authoritarians. But just because China does something is not something we should emulate, whether it's protectionism or other countries' protectionism. I agree with Art. That's what I said in the beginning. The threat of tariffs is a good thing. The threat of sanctions actually can be a good thing. But once you put either tariffs or sanctions on, then their only value is coming off. And this is what I harangue people all the time about with Russia or China. You want China to do something? Offer them the removal of a sanction in order to get their transactional. That's diplomacy. Offer them to get rid of something if they'll do something. If you don't want them to sell dual-use parts to Russia in the Ukraine war, say, what we did is Blinken went over there and yelled at them. And in public, that's a problem. You don't yell at the Chinese government and expect them to do anything for you. He should have gone over quietly and said, why don't we remove one of these tariffs or one of these sanctions we have on you if you'll quit sending arms or dual-use weapons to Russia?
So, Arthur, for you, the rumor out there, and I don't know if it's true, but it's been reported by a number of major media outlets that Donald Trump tomorrow or the next day will call for a 15% across-the-board tariff.
I don't know anything about it.
But if that were true, would you favor that?
No, I mean the 15% tariff just for fun.
Well, to raise revenue.
Well,
bring jobs back to America.
Well, I think Rand is completely correct that a across the board small tariff to eliminate reduced taxes or whatever would be fine. But I have no idea of this, and you're the inside guy. Is he going to do it?
I don't know. I mean, Michael Falconer probably knows the answer to that question, but he can't.
Well, I will interject though. The only way we get a tax reduction in exchange for a tariff is if it went through us. He's talking about doing the tariffs himself without Congress. He's not going to ask Congress for tariffs. He's going to do them on his own. If he does a 15% hike, see, online I get people saying, "Oh, Rand Paul, you're wrong. He's going to get rid of the income tax." You got me. I'll vote for that. I can accept getting rid of the personal income tax in exchange for across the board tariff. Sure. Still has to be reasonable.
I would do it.
We're not going to get that. Any tariff we're getting is going to be on top.
All right. Let's turn it over to the reason that I wanted Senator Rand Paul and Senator Ron Johnson to be here is because these two probably have the biggest fiscal conscience of anyone in the Senate. And you two are unfortunately all too rare in terms of wanting to get our fiscal situation under control.
Can I do one interjection there? I was talking to Ron Johnson back in 2000, I think it was 2017, and we were in your office on the floor going through this stuff, and you had the pass-throughs. Remember all that stuff there?
He saved us.
And no, but he saved us by negotiating.
Yes.
He said, I threatened not to vote for the bill.
Right.
So I could stop other people from threatening not to vote for the bill on the other side.
Right.
Don't worry, I'm going to vote for the bill, is exactly what you told me. And that strategy is a negotiation strategy, and you succeeded. Without you doing that, we would not have gotten the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Yeah, so thank you, by the way. The reason we got that 20% reduction on small businesses was because of Ron Johnson. So we all applaud what you did. So now we have a problem, but I don't want to talk to you about the tax bill. I want to talk to you about this budget. It is obscene what's going on. And the numbers just came out a few days ago that we're $200 billion over the last 3 months. Oh, I don't know if you're familiar with these numbers, Senator Paul. We're running $200 billion deficit higher than we were last year, which was the biggest deficit ever. So we've got to do something about this spending and bringing this debt down and growing the economy faster. Can we do it?
So let me just quickly weigh in on the trade. I agree with Arthur and Paul and Rand. I'm an unabashed free trader. One thing I learned about President Trump, I remember when I was campaigning in 2016 on the same ticket with him, he talked about foreign policy and said, we're way too unpredictable when it comes to foreign policy. And I'm thinking, man, that's the wrong answer. I think we need to be pretty predictable. He proved me wrong. You know, unpredictability definitely worked, and I think probably the same thing true of tariffs. The other thing I learned about President Trump is when I don't agree with him on something, I stop and think, go, what am I missing? I mean, Trump's a smart guy, okay? And so I guess I'm willing to give see what he says, see what he does. You know, I have my concerns. I realize, you know, tariffs are certainly a double-edged sword. So we'll see what happens there. But anyway, got a fair amount of confidence in his intelligence in terms of how he does this. But you know, from my standpoint, I think the absolute number one thing we must accomplish is we have to bring down the level of spending. The essential ingredient of America is freedom. It's what we've used, you know, for generations to dream and aspire and build and create this marvel of a country. When you grow government, freedom necessarily recedes. And we've gone from, you know, when we actually balance the budget 18% of GDP to we've been averaging 20, 21%. Now we're on a path of basically 24, 25%. Prior to the pandemic, 2019, total government spending was $4.4 trillion. I remember a couple of years in when all of a sudden the Republican conference abandoned our principled stance that we weren't going to be for earmarks. All of a sudden we were for earmarks in an omnibus. We were in the room with most of our Republican colleagues, and I just asked the question, anybody know how much we spent last year? And nobody raised their hand, nobody volunteered. Now, maybe somebody knew, but they didn't volunteer it. I went out to the Washington Press Corps, asked them the same question, and one of the members of the press said, well, it's like over $1 trillion. No, that's just discretionary spending. I mean total spending. The answer was about $6.5 trillion, I think, when I asked it that day. I granted him immediate absolution because we never talk about it. I mean, we are the world's largest financial entity. We are, in theory, the 535-member board of directors, and nobody really knows. I didn't know until I started asking the question because we never talk about it. Nobody knew how much in total the federal government spent. So over the last 5 years, we've gone from $4.4 trillion. The last 5 years, we've averaged $6.5 trillion. Last year, we spent $6.9. Biden was budgeting $7.3. This is absurd. I mean, the analogy I use is a family. Has them, you know, spend $100,000 a year. They have a major illness. All of a sudden, they ramp it up to $150,000. The family member gets well. Do they keep spending $150,000, borrowing $50,000? Of course not. But that's in effect what we've done. So what I did in a Wall Street Journal column is I put together a justification how we can, you know, ratchet down for the first time and literally ratchet down the size, the scope of the federal government from where it is today. So I laid out a couple different scenarios. I went back to Bill Clinton in 1998. By the way, that was the first year we actually had a surplus since 1969. So it's not exactly like running a deficit's an unusual thing. But what I did is I inflated or increased his spending, which was $1.7 trillion back then, based on population inflation, except for Social Security, Medicare, and interest. But those I use 2025 figures, okay? If you do that, you just have a baseline spending of $5.5 trillion. Now, I like that one because it just so happens Joe Biden is projecting $5.5 trillion of revenue this year. I mean, that's how close we are. Okay, if that's too aggressive for the big spenders, I went to Obama in 2014. By the way, I don't think either Bill Clinton or Obama spent too little in 1998 or 2014. You do that with 2014 spending at 6.2. Again, we're spending about $7 trillion now. I hear the House Freedom Caucus say, we're going to demand $2.5 trillion of spending cuts. You do that, and it's $10 trillion over 10 years. They're not even coming close to asking enough because they're not looking at the right metric. The metric we have to focus on is total government spending. As government grows, our freedom recedes, and that essential ingredient is diminished. So the one I'm actually using now is President Trump on his way out the door. Actually, this is, I think, January of 2020. He issued his fiscal year 2021 budget. So he's got his projections for 2025. So if you use those projections, again, slot in Social Security, Medicare, and interest on top of all the other spending, you'd be spending $6 trillion. Now, the good news is our incoming chair of the Budget Committee, Lindsey Graham, he's for a two-step process. I am too. I think we need to get that border funding done right away. And, we absolutely had to prevent a massive automatic tax increase, which was a real problem with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that automatically expires. But I sure would like to take the time to do as Steve Moore, Steve Forbes, I'm sure all of us on the state, I'd like to simplify and rationalize our tax code, and that'll take a little bit longer time. But anyway, so if you use President Trump's number, his budget plus that is $6 trillion. And Lindsey literally called me on my flight, on my way out the door on Friday, and said, I want you to kind of lead the group to lay in that budget of $6 trillion as we pass that first reconciliation package. So, wish us luck. I mean, we're going through all the detail, assigning it, based on mandatory spending, discretionary spending, splitting them out in the appropriation accounts. Just real quick, I'll shut up then after this. What's not widely known is what's been happening very deviously by the Uniparty. They've taken discretionary spending and they slid it into mandatory. So in 2019, we spent $42 billion on other mandatory. Not Social Security, not Medicare, not even Medicaid. Exclude those three. Other mandatory spending went from $642 billion to $1.310 trillion. Okay, so we've increased it like $680 billion, almost as much as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid combined also went up since 2019. So we have a spending problem, and I love the fact that Scott Bessent, in his confirmation hearing, declared that. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem, and that's why I say that is the number one metric. That's the number one thing we have to do. That would be game-changing. If we literally can bring down spending by about $1 trillion, we'd be that much closer to balancing the budget. And you know what? We wouldn't have to really increase the debt ceiling, or certainly not by much.
So, by the way, Senator Paul, I know I promised you I'd only keep you here for about 15 or 20 minutes, but I'd love to. Do you have to rush out? If you do,
I didn't know Ron and ours. Now I can stay forever.
Okay, good. Because okay, well, can you hand me that?
I can stay a few more minutes. What am I looking for? Microphone?
Yes. Okay. So, what I want to show you guys some charts. Everybody some charts, and I'd like you guys to react to them. So many of you probably know that Arthur Laffer and I wrote a book recently called The Trump Economic Miracle. And by the way, does anybody want to guess? I'll give $1 to anyone who can guess who came up with that title.
Donald Trump.
Yes.
One big, beautiful bill.
One beautiful book. Exactly.
Where's my dollar?
It was a funny story. Arthur and I were meeting with Trump a few months ago, and we told him we had this book, that we were doing, and he said, "What are you going to call that?" And I said, "Well, so we're going to call this Trumponomics 2.0 because we wrote the book Trumponomics, remember?" And so I said, "I don't like that title. Call it the Trump Economic Miracle." And if the president says do it, we did it. So anyway, these are some of the charts I want your reactions to these things. And so this is Trumponomics 2.0. Okay, so this is what I was just talking to you about, Senator. These are the numbers from the last 3 months. Outlays are up by 11% over last year. In 3 months. As you know, the fiscal year started on October 1, so we have 3 months of data. We're running 11% above last year, and revenues are down. Those are bad, both bad trends. That makes me very nervous. And one of the points I've been trying to make, by the way, is it is a fairy tale when Joe Biden runs around, when he gave his farewell speech, which, by the way, was one of the worst speeches in American history, when he said, I'm handing over a healthy economy to Donald Trump. He is not. He is not. We have a deficit out of control, and I'll show you this next one. Inflation, these are the inflation numbers. They're just god-awful. Inflation is officially 21%, and by the way, those red bars are what happened under Trump, and the blue bars are the price increases under Biden. So you can see virtually every single food item, energy item, household appliance item more expensive under Biden. And then I'll just show you one or two more. So this is, by the way, the evidence is crystal clear. The reason, the most important reason that the Democrats lost this election was inflation. Americans hate inflation. So you can see the trend of what happened with prices. Incidentally, there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal today talking about how all these economists on Wall Street are worried about inflation under Trump, saying his policies are going to be inflationary. Wait a minute, the average inflation rate when Trump was president was 1.9%. The average inflation rate when Biden was office was 6%, and they say they're worried.
Warren has a great explanation for that. She says people became greedy, and that greed causes
No,
inflation.
that's true. They cannot read.
That's what Elizabeth Warren tells people. I mean, but the thing is we can have all kinds of different things we can propose. I think an easy way to look at it is what should we spend? What comes in? I mean, we're bringing in $400 billion a month or more. That's a lot of money. Just spend what comes in. And what Ron and I try to work on is when they propose some kind of new thing they want to spend it on, take it from somewhere else, And when I go home, if I'm in North Carolina where the flooding was or in Kentucky side where the flooding was, I ask people, do you want to send money to Ukraine or would you rather repave the roads in North Carolina? I don't get anybody saying, oh, please send more of my money to Ukraine. None of that. But as push comes to shove in this, there's going to be a reconciliation package. It requires that it's a simple majority. It's a budget vote. It's a special process. It can't be filibustered, which means a simple majority can pass it. So Ron and I and two others can dictate the process if we want to. I would throw Mike Lee in there and maybe a couple others. We can dictate what comes out. Ron's on budget committee, so he has even more leverage. He can't get out of the budget committee. So they will set a number on the budget. But I can tell you what they did the last time. They said, well, it's just a vehicle. It's not really a budget. It's a vehicle for the tax cuts. And it was, but it also isn't. It's a number that actually goes into all the spending. So it's a real number, and all the spending is based on what comes out of the budget. We can dictate what it is. Instead, what usually happens, we won't mention their names, but one or two in our caucus on the far other extreme of our caucus dictate what happens, and to get them on board, usually we bust the budget on spending. What it needs to be is the conservatives, us sticking together and saying, no mas, we're not going to do it unless you cut spending.
Let me put a finer point on this. Trump has to be behind this. And so that's one of the reasons I've been out there with my column and also saying I don't think anybody that voted for Trump expects us to remain at President Biden and the Democrats' spending level. So that's a little pressure on the president there. It's like, your budget would have, inflated or increased with Social Security, Medicare, and interest would be $6 trillion. Mr. President, you ought to be pressing hard for no more than a $6 trillion spending.
Well, isn't that what he's doing with Doge? I mean, I remember you were the one that's got all these wasteful spending examples of it all over the place, ran for years. But isn't that what Vivek and Elon are supposed to be doing?
Yeah, that'll certainly feed into that. But Rand gave us in the conference a pretty thick little pamphlet there. All the think tanks, the Heritage Foundation contributes to this, all the different ways you can, turn things back over the states. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. So that's what we pass the budget. So we use it like people use a budget for, to actually restrain and set the top number. And then the committees, rather than figure out how to spend more money, they have to figure out how to save it and how to beat those budget numbers. Using some of those things like Rand provided a conference.
But Art, some of this stuff, I mean, where would we be as a country if we didn't know that lonely rats like to use cocaine more than well-socialized happy rats? Where would we be?
What was the one? I take that personally. What was the one you were saying? I think I got the number right, Senator. That We are spending, I think, $10 billion a year on rent for office
Empty office buildings. We have a commission
That's
on this.
insanity.
One of my good friends from Kentucky, a
Wait,
successful
that's 10
business guy's on
billion,
the commission.
right?
He's been saying, sell it, sell it, sell it. And they write these reports and send them to us, and nobody ever did it. But he's still on the board, and I'm hoping we will sell some of this property. But, you know, one of my other favorite ones was, this was over $1 million to study whether or not Japanese quail on cocaine, whether or not they are more sexually promiscuous on cocaine than not. But here,
And the answer is?
we're gonna poll the audience.
Inquiring minds want to know.
But here's the thing: is most of these crazy research projects come from the National Science Foundation. The first person to start complaining about this, William Proxmire, in 1972. In fact, one of the first things he complained about was they did a study and they wanted to know what makes people more aggressive, tequila or gin. And so they took codfish. I don't know how you get a codfish to drink gin, but they poured a bunch of gin in the codfish, and they poured a bunch of gin and or tequila in the others, and everybody knows it's got to be tequila, right?
All right, I'm gonna move on.
But the National Science Foundation, last year we had a bill called the CHIPS bill, where everybody decided we're going to combat China by subsidizing Intel. And we're going to combat China by subsidizing Taiwanese chip manufacturers, all these people. But in that same bill, they doubled the National Science Foundation, had all the Democrats and half the Republicans. So we say Doge and everybody's against all that stuff, and I'm all for what they're doing, but we still have to have pressure from the public on the Republican caucus. We will get no Democrat votes. We have to have Republicans voting against waste.
I see some people standing in the back, and I just want to let you know there are seats in the front if you don't want to stand and want to move up. There's plenty of seats up front. So Arthur, this one is an interesting chart. This is the what's happening with commodity prices over the. Can you see that? I know you're an old man. So anyway, what this is showing is that since the Fed started cutting rates back, what was it, about 3 months ago, that the commodity prices have gone through the roof. They've just been spiking upward. Oil's close to $80 a barrel right now. This worries me that we haven't solved the inflation problem when you see these commodity prices spiking like this. And I wonder if you have an observation about that.
Historically, commodity prices have been a precursor of inflation, generalized inflation. And, you know, one of the reasons why you're having gold prices and some of these others and Bitcoin is because our currency is just not what it should be. And private markets are trying to find an alternative. And I don't know if Bitcoin's the right answer or not, but they surely are trying to get out of currencies. And the thing that shocks me most of all is that our currency is probably the strongest currency of all of them. And I mean, if ours is good, imagine how crappy the rest of the world is. I mean, it's just there. But let me.
Well, they're the tallest midget in the room, and I know you can appreciate that. Sorry.
Don't take time to short jokes over here.
Well, let me just do one. Can I just do one? Of course you may. Oh, Scott! Yay! Good. A fellow Yaley, by the way, everybody. Just want you to know.
Please. I know you can't say a lot because you still haven't been confirmed, but
when I first met Art, I told him, I said, you know, I met Ronald Reagan on the Yale campus in 1980, and his nephew was one of the 7 people with me who went to meet the future president because nobody cared.
So
This is actually being live streamed, just so you know.
Great.
Yes. So
I'm happy. I'm happy to take Yale shots.
So you may not be able to say anything, but I think we all. Your performance in front of the Senate Finance Committee was a tour de force. Thank you for everything.
I appreciated Senator Johnson's common sense on let's get back to the baseline from pre-COVID.
So true.
Yep.
Sure.
And
here.
and everyone said, "Oh, you had these zingers," and I said, "No, I just presented facts." Many of them as a result of Steve, Kudlow, Laffer, many more. But my work with this committee.
I know Steve more, but who's many more?
I'm not going to make any mini jokes with you.
So Scott, we're going to give you a little education here. I'm going to show you some of these charts, and I think they'll be of value to you as you move into Treasury. By the way, we're so proud that you got Michael Faulkner working with you as number 2. He's a genius, and I've loved him.
And Dan Katz.
What's that?
Dan Katz is chief of staff.
Great to meet you. And by the way, you stole, how dare you steal Alexandra Priade away from us? I mean, I'll never forget that. By the way, Alexandra, where is she? Alexandra, you put this whole thing together. Thank you so much. It's been you're amazing. Tour de force. Thank you. Okay, right along. This is something I want everybody's reaction to, and Scott, if you can react, it's up to you. But this just shows regulatory costs by administration. This is something that you're going to be inheriting. Look at Biden's numbers; they tower way over even what Obama gave us in regulations. And I wonder if any of the 4 of you have any observations about this.
I'll just say I think the most significant thing that President Trump did in his first term was deregulate. And coming from the private sector, you need stability. And for 4 years, private firms could concentrate on providing better products, better services, treating their employees better, compensating them better, not have to worry, look over their shoulder in terms of what law or regulation they're going to have to comply with. So I thought the deregulatory effort of President Trump is extraordinary.
And one way we did it in 2017 is through the Congressional Review Act. Through a simple majority, we can actually repeal regulations that have only been on the book 90 days. The people who are doing the research say we may have as much as 100. I don't know if we can get 100 done. Last time I think we did 20, but I think somewhere between 20 and 100 we can actually repeal outright. Has to be signed by the president, but we now have a president who would sign that.
I would add is what I found very interesting about line of questioning on Thursday was everyone said, well, aren't tariffs inflationary? Well, isn't deregulation disinflationary?
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to show you the next one. Boy, this looks familiar. This is what happens when you cut tax rates. And you can see that red line there is the highest tax rate. You may be a little bit familiar with this one, Arthur Laffer. But you can see that when Reagan came in, 70% tax rate, you all cut it down. See, this is why I think Reagan was a great president, Arthur, because he cut the highest rate from 70 to 28%. And then look at the revenues. And by the way, look at the tail end of that. Look at how much revenues went up after Trump cut taxes. So, Arthur, is this the Laffer curve?
Yep.
Right.
Never heard of it. No, that's exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
use your mic. So.
Oh, sorry. The Hauser Law, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, tax rates here do have consequences. And if any of you want to get a chance, the book I did with Brian Dimitrovic and Gene Sinkfield on tax is a complete history of the U.S. income tax. It's just shocking. Every single time we've raised the highest marginal income tax rate in the United States, every single time, 3 things have happened. The economy has underperformed, tax revenues from the rich have gone down, and the poor have been hammered. Every single time we've lowered tax rates on the rich, the economy has outperformed, tax revenues from the rich went way up, and the poor have been benefited dramatically. Every time.
It never fails. That.
And by the way, we have every single tax return. This is not a sampling issue or anything like that. And where did I get these data as adjusted, correctly adjusted? Was from the Inequality Center by Piketty and Saez and Sancheva and Zuckman. These are their numbers that they never report in any of their papers. Yeah. And it's just, if you look at the plots, it's shocking. And of course you get great equality of income at very, very high taxes. Hell, everyone's at 0. That's perfectly equal income. That is the only way of getting equality, is to make sure everyone has nothing.
They have great equality in Cuba, I understand.
Yeah, right. No, that's exactly right, Rand.
There is no Gini coefficient in Venezuela.
No.
So, by the way, I want to make sure everyone knows that Arthur Laffer is world famous because he helped write the Trump tax cuts. He helped write the Reagan tax cuts. And many of you may not be aware of this. He also wrote the Calvin Coolidge tax cuts of 1923. I don't know, but it works every time. But look at this one. I mean, this is amazing. We just had this in the hotline yesterday. These are corporate tax receipts over the last 10 years. Look at that, Arthur. I mean, look at that. We cut the rate. And look at that's a over 100% increase in revenues.
But can I the corporate rate, what if you cut it to zero?
Wow.
Now, the point of it is here, you shouldn't, see, this is misleading. And forgive me, Steve, it's correct and illustrates the point you're making. But you should look at total revenues. Because 90% of the benefits from these cuts is you create output, income, employment, you get more payroll tax, you get more income tax. The thing is, when you've got a rotten tax like the corporate tax, which we should never have a corporate tax. I mean, here you go. You get a company that makes great products at low cost and and does not use lawyers and accountants and deferred income specialists, favor grabbers and lobbyists, and they report profits like mad. You tax the living bejabbers out of them. You get another company that comes in there and makes a crappy product no one wants at very high cost. They hire lawyers and accountants, and you bail those guys out. The corporate tax is a bad, bad, bad tax, only second to the death tax. And we should not have a corporate tax.
And Steve, the other point I think I would make on this is that 2018, 2019, and then we get into the COVID years, but 2018 and then that drop into 19, that's the full expensing, the 100% expensing going in.
That's right.
So you're actually coiling the spring. So the Biden years actually had the advantage that the Trump 1.0 actually took the tax hit. Mm-hmm. That then you had the fully depreciated equipment that generated the taxes.
So by the way, Dr. Laffer, I actually have a proposed back in 2017, turn all businesses into pass-through businesses. So tax business income at the ownership level, it'd do wonders.
Well, we all agreed with you back then on that. The only thing we had with a problem with you and the pastors is it wasn't for everyone. And how did they select which ones got it and which ones didn't? In
the end, they all got it. But again, if we literally would
you cut doctors out of it. You didn't let doctors get it. We're still mad.
And financial firms, you didn't get them either. I hear that all the time too. But it was great what you did. You just should have made it universal.
Let me ask you all about something that Donald Trump campaigned on, which I thought was a brilliant idea. It came out sort of at the tail end of and again, Scott, you can comment on this if you like, or you can stay mum on this, but he came up with this idea that if you make something in America, the profits on that will be 15%. What do you think?
Well, personally, the C Corp rate right now is the effective rate is 10.8, so we're below 15%.
Say that again?
The effective rate on large corporations right now is 10.8%. Again, I was not.
How about that? I'm going to have to look that up.
Well, it's JCT. For small corporations, 14.8. For pass-throughs, it's over 20. And again, I don't like that disparity between 95% of American businesses and C Corp. So I want to equalize the tax treatment.
I agree with you.
But
remember,
all businesses.
you have. Does that include
but no one wants the effective rates. Statutory rates are what you should be after in this thing. That's what you guys in Congress.
Well,
and the president
what I would argue, if you want to see how messed up and complex the tax
agree.
system is, take a look at the delta between the marginal tax rate and the effective tax rate, and ours is still way too high. So again, I want to simplify and rationalize our tax system, but the first thing we have to do is we have to make it permanent. If you want to evaluate what happened with Tax Cut and Jobs Act, the fact that a lot of it expires, we fail.
How are you going to do that? No, tell me.
So the way you do that is you use current
Get 60
policy.
senators who think clearly.
So you use current policy, and that does it automatically. All right. You use current policy when you pass our budget.
What he's saying is it's a bean counter thing.
It is.
So the bean counters count it according to current law. So they say when the tax cuts expire, we now have to reinstitute them costs $4 trillion. Well, that's what exists. Why would we have to pay for it again?
Yes.
But
good point.
So it's this bean counter thing that has trapped us. But the bean counter thing goes into reconciliation, which goes into whether it can be.
And who put the bean counter rules into Senate rules?
So the beauty is
Senators,
the budget committee decides what our budget is. And by the way, for all spending, that's current law. So if you have a temporary spending program and it ends, it doesn't cost anything to extend it. So we're going to equalize treatment between tax policy and spending policy. We're going to treat it all as current policy. If we pass that sucker and then we extend the tax cuts, again, I want to simplify and rationalize the tax code. I want to throw it all in the hopper. Yes. So now, in answer to your question, I want to throw it all in the hopper, simplify, rationalize the tax code, make it all permanent, and end up,
Can I ask
eliminate
you a serious
$400 billion
question
in compliance costs.
Did you back Jerry Brown in 1992? We got rid of all federal taxes. Now, I was his economist. We got rid of all federal taxes, all of them, except for sin taxes, and had 2 flat rate taxes, one on business net sales and one on personal unadjusted gross income, okay? That was it. And we had that as a 13% flat tax. We got rid of every federal tax there was and had 2 flat rate taxes. I want to know, were you with him on that? Were you with him on that?
I think I was in high school.
I was making plastic back then.
I thought you were really bright in high school. I
was paying taxes back then, manufacturing plastic.
The question is, we need to have the Senate. We need to have the politics do it, get it right. You guys make those bean counter rules.
Well,
you got to be able to undo them too.
So the good news is, I want to make sure people understand what these bean counters are talking about. So the current law is the lower corporate tax rate, the doubling of the standard. In other words, the Trump tax cut is the current law. And so that should be, the baseline should be if we keep current law. And by the way, had a good conversation with the Senate Finance Committee Chair.
Why do you say that? It's not current law if it expires.
I'm sorry. I meant current policy. Thank you for
current
policy. So what Crapo is saying, as I understand it, is the current policy should be. Are you with me on that, Senator? So do you agree with that? We should.
Yeah, and to me, it's all shenanigans and artificial nonsense because it really isn't real. We have the tax rates that we have now. To continue something you have shouldn't be something that you have to now pay for something you already have.
How many agree with Senator Paul on that one?
But that's why they're expiring. Is we bought into that last time. We're not going to buy into it this time. Again, the parliamentarian will probably weigh in on this, but.
This is an arcane rule that they set up in the 1970s, the budget law. Yeah. But we also think, and Ron can comment for himself, that the Budget Committee's instructions can overrule the bean counters. The bureaucrats, we think, can be overruled by Congress.
Well, who made those rules?
But that's yet to be determined. It is Congress, but it's difficult to change these things because often you need a decisive majority of 60 to change things. We have 53, not 60. But we still think that. Ron, what do you think? You think the Budget Committee can change it?
We're going to do it. And we'll see. There'll be, gnashing of teeth, I'm sure. But we're going to do it, and we'll see what the parliamentarian rules on it. But, again, it makes no sense to treat spending different than you treat taxes. So we're just going to equalize that treatment.
This goes into every area. I mean, it goes into regulations as well. We all talk how we need to reduce regulations. Yet I think single best thing that Trump did was the price transparency.
Yeah, I was just going to say
and,
that.
That is a regulation that you have to post the prices you transact. Yeah, that we need to do. That is a regulation. That's the one regulation I really want to see. If he did that, that's 20% of GDP is not private, is not markets. You can't go in and buy what you know and what you get. And we don't know. Any of you look into price transparency. It's just incredible. But, I hate when we throw
who's the big supporter in this room?
Cynthia Fisher is the number one supporter
Cynthia,
in the world in this.
What's the name of the group again?
Stand up, Cynthia, would you please, and just tell everyone. She's the most amazing person around. Very seriously.
She is. Thank you for what you're doing on this. So
we got it passed in Colorado with a Democratic governor, a gay Democrat who happened to be my intern when he was 13.
And what's the name of the group again?
So it's healthcare price transparency, and Trump got it done by executive order, and within 6 months moved mountains to make all hospitals and insurance companies have to post all of their prices.
Gosh.
So we can have free market principles and have prices and have billing and payment integrity to the known prices. And we found that prices vary by 10 times in the same hospital.
Wow.
And across hospitals, they vary by 31 times in the same state. That's huge. So let's get those $300 MRIs versus paying over $3,000.
And what did we call that?
A market economy that functions.
What was the title of our article?
Okay, go ahead.
Le Croix de Santé.
So it's really amazing. Art was totally key. Dr. Laffer was key to help get this done on the basic savings, that we can find that $1 trillion every single year, because we're at a $5 trillion spend in healthcare. And we can, by reduce it by 20%, would be huge, and it's doable, because right now, every American works 1 day a week just to pay for healthcare.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So finally, I think this is the last chart, and this is kind of fundamental to the argument that Arthur and I make in the book Trumponomics 2.0, or the Trump Economic Miracle, is how important economic growth is to solving our budget problem. And this is really, I wish every single one of your colleagues in the Senate and the House understood this. But if you look at this red line, that's the scary chart that we're all aware of about what happens if we stay on the current policy. And you can see that the debt just goes up and up and up ad infinitum to very scary levels. But what people don't understand, and everyone in this room has seen that many, many times, what people don't understand is that the growth rate, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, Scott, but the growth rate the Congressional Budget Office is forecasting.
1.8%.
What, 1.7?
1.7.
1.7. So, Arthur, we can do a lot better than that, right? I mean, what's the average growth rate of the last 75 years? Like 3.2, 3.3%. So what we did is we just looked at, what if you just put 3% growth into that equation, not 1.7%? And look what happens. You grow the economy, and the GDP, and you see that curve starts to bend down, which is something we all agree has to happen. If you put 3.5% growth, is that shooting for the moon? 3.5%? No, we could do it. And if you get that, look at this. I mean, the debt. So my point is, and I'd like your all reaction to this. Everything we do in Washington should be about increasing economic growth. And if it increases economic growth, it's worth doing. And if it doesn't, it isn't. And so why don't you just go down the line on that? Senator, what do you think?
And I'm going to end with this because I'm going to have to run. But what I would say is that, yes, when we did balance back in 2000, it was largely huge amounts of growth and huge amounts of revenue. So growth is part of it. But I would say, to be realistic, because politically this has been a real question, you have to look at all spending.
Yes.
And Ron mentioned this earlier. Many people have said, well, we're taking entitlements off the table. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, we're not going to do anything to those. You have to look at them, and you have to do something about them. And I'll give you an example of how far behind the 8 ball we are on Social Security. Within 10 years, every Social Security check will have to be reduced 20%. They are running out of money. They will run out of money in 10 years. 12 years ago, I introduced a bill to gradually raise the age on people 55 and under, a couple months a year, to gradually get to 70. I did it again recently, but if you compare the two times, 12 years ago when I did it, it fixed 2/3 of the shortfall for Social Security. It was a huge fix. If you do it now, it fixes 6 months. So we are headed towards a disaster. Every day we wait on Social Security, every day we wait on Medicare, as you get to the end, it has to be something dramatic. I mean, extraordinarily dramatic, and it will have to involve paying less money, lots less money, precipitously in 2034. It's coming for Social Security and Medicare. We need to start now. We need to have gradual reform. If we take that off the table—
Does that gradual reform include personal accounts for Social Security? Or
it could, but
Okay.
that doesn't— the personal accounts, if you take money away from Social Security for personal accounts, it doesn't make the fiscal problem better. The fiscal problem gets better by raising the age and probably means testing the benefits as well. But if you have 2/3 of the spending, which is entitlements, you don't touch it, you're buying the 8 ball. The remaining third is what we vote on when you see a budget. It's called discretionary, military and non-military. Of that remaining third, the hawkish Republicans have taken military and said it has to be a 3% increase, and then they're going beyond that. They're going to use reconciliation, and they don't tell you this explicitly, to bust the military caps even further. So you have all the entitlements going up, the military caps are 3%, and they're going to bust those. So you're left with 16% of the budget. And this is the one thing McCarthy said that was absolutely true. Everybody was complaining about Kevin McCarthy. The conservatives said it was a rotten deal, and it was a rotten deal. People say it was a rotten deal. He could have done better. And he looked at him, he says, look, you took entitlements off the table. You took the military off the table. You gave me 16% of the budget, and you expected me to do something with it. We have to look at all spending. We have to be brave enough to do it. I've been talking about this since I started. You have to raise the age of Social Security. And they said, what do you hate, old people? I said, I know. I aspire to be an old person. If we have to reform these things, so they won't be there in a few years. Thank you, everybody.
Senator.
We did reform Social Security under Ronald Reagan, by the way, just for the record. We did extend the age of retirement. We did reduce benefits fairly substantially as well under Reagan. And we moved that number out. I think the number back then that we were told was about 8 or 9 years left before the system went bankrupt, and then we just changed it there as well. So you can do it.
Okay.
And you really can, and it can be done, and it should be done.
Okay. Scott, do you have anything to say about that?
I'll say
your 3%. This is your 3-3-3.
Well, this is my 3. Yeah,
Yeah.
This is the first. This is actually the second 3, and I will say exactly like I said in the Great Larry Kudlow show, changing the growth trajectory, the upward changes the trajectory of the nation.
You're so right. You got it.
And I won't tell you which senator it was, but he is a senator from New York, and I was having a discussion with him, and telling me why he was going to work, and I said, look, why don't you give us a chance? That there's going to be a referendum in 26, there'll be a referendum in 28, and I think this will work. I think we're going to win the referendum, and I think there's a chance the Democrats are a little scared it may work. And then what's the argument?
Okay, Scott, I'm going to let you get down from the stage because I know that our good friend Alexandra is hyperventilating that you're saying anything in public, but no, thank you so much for being here. You're amazing. Wait, next Treasury Secretary of the United States, Scott Bessent. So, Senator Johnson, quickly on this, and then I want to turn to Bob Nardelli.
Well, I've always said the number one component of the solution for all this is economic growth. It's the number one component. Again, my only concern would be if you just focus on that, so that's going to solve our problems, we still have to ratchet down the size of government. This is completely unjustified, the level of spending we're at right now, and we have to focus on that as well. And we've got to do some hard work. If we are able to do that, if we're getting close to balance, we'll have the financial wherewithal to plus up benefits to Social Security, where, again, everybody wants to keep that off the table. Listen, I'd be happy to go in there and fix it, but the political will is just not there on any side of the aisle. So recognize that reality. So do everything we can to shrink the deficit by growing the economy, but also dramatically ratchet down spending to a rational level. Again, based on what Bill Clinton spent, based on what Obama spent, or based on what Trump was budgeting. Right now, I guess we're focusing on what Trump was budgeting. I would think he ought to support that.
So, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Bob Nardelli is here. So, Bob, thanks so much for joining. Bob Nardelli, he is a corporate business genius. He was the #2 man at GE under Jack Welch. How many years was that?
About 30 years.
He was a pretty good businessman.
Very good. Very good.
And then was the CEO of Chrysler, and then CEO of Home Depot. So this is a guy who knows a lot about business. And by the way, you're one of the few businessmen, aren't you, businessmen or women in the Senate?
Yeah, certainly.
That's a big problem.
The only manufacturer.
Yeah.
I think the only accountant.
Maybe we should get Nardelli to run for Senate.
That'd be nice.
So, my question is, when you have business confidence, so for example, I think there's a lot of political capital that Donald Trump has right now. And, you look at the business surveys, both small business and larger businesses, and they're confident right now. And the small business survey is off through the roof. So how important is that? And why do you think that as you look at Donald Trump's agenda, what is it about it that makes businessmen so optimistic? Maybe it's the fact that Donald Trump is a businessman himself, but what do you think?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's humbling to be up here, Steve, where, on all the experts talking about policy. And for 53 years, all I've done is run companies. And all I know, Senator, as you know, is if you don't make your numbers, you can't talk enough. Make your numbers, you don't have to talk at all, right? And so I've never, in 53 years, and I've been blessed to run a lot of companies almost in every industry you can think of. And if you aren't passionate about your budget, if you aren't passionate about either you innovate or you'll evaporate in today's economy, Change is the only constant, and you must do both. You must grow the top line, and we all know you can't, get to prosperity by cutting just the bottom line. It has to be a combination. And what I heard up here today, Steve, was so encouraging, because we're coming out of 4 years where, I was very, very concerned about the future until we started to see President Trump hit the stage. And I went from, not optimistic, not pessimistic, but realistic when you see the missteps and the debacles that this administration and the waste on EV, on what they did about energy, basically surrendered our energy independence. I ran GE Power Systems for 5 years, and we were moving aggressively towards energy independence, and we gave it away. We stopped shipping LNG, which was probably one of the biggest geopolitical things we could have used, right, to help Germany out versus buying it from Russia. Senator, am I right? And then we go down this path of, the green movement, and you look at this spending chart you put up there. You saw what happened in the last 3 to 4 months. I mean, it was like drunken soldiers going out there spending money, trying to get it appropriated before this new administration comes in, when it was supposed to be an orderly transition. So I would tell you, as a business person, I've run Fortune 25 companies, I've run smaller companies, I do a lot of work with middle market, lower middle market, and I would tell you, Senator, if we don't get this tax cut either permanently put in place or extended, many of these small family businesses that I work with are done. They're absolutely done. They can't afford to go back to these
What's
tax
the
rates.
most important feature of the Trump tax cut that affects these businesses you're talking about?
Well, I think, Steve, I think, you just go from top to bottom. When I was running GE Power Systems, you talk about tax cuts, and you talk about corporate taxes and about fair trade. That was another discussion that came up here. And I'd be competing with Siemens and ABB, who had much lower tax rates, corporate tax rates, than I had to deal with, right? And so we have to think about that, and we have to bring that tax cut all the way down, Steve, I think, to benefit everybody. And corporate America gets a bad rap a lot of times, Senator, right? But corporate America is made up of Americans. And a lot of corporations are really beholden to the pension fund. So we need to keep doing better, because the Senator said here, whether it's Social Security or pension funds, we've got to keep that machine going to take care of people that have paid into that for years. And now with the prospects that they're not going to get anything back, it's pretty sad.
So we're going to take some questions now. We've got about 10 or 15 minutes left, and so when you ask a question, please identify yourself, and we'll try to get through as many of these as we can. And I see John Tamney has his hand up. So, John, go ahead.
Hi, John Tamney, Parkview Institute, Real Clear Markets. My question is, we're talking about growth, but I've seen from Phil Gramm, I've seen from Senator Mike Crapo, I've even heard from Steve Moore that the Trump tax cuts did not lower the burden on the rich. And I want to comment, there's no growth in tax cuts for lower earners because they spend it. Tax cuts for the rich, they invest it. There's the growth. They're going to kill you guys for cutting taxes no matter what. So why not make it about reducing the burden on the richest? There's the growth.
Why did you take that on?
Well, he was after all of you guys, but we did cut tax. John, we did cut the thing from 39.6 to 37 in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The one that I thought was the most important one of all there that no one talks about is the inheritance tax was dropped a lot. I mean, the exemptions were put in there, which is really, really important. I mean, I'm 84 and I'm not working for your kids, John. I'm working for my kids, my grandkids, and my great-grandkids. And that's a huge incentive in there. So I think the true story of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was it really did reduce burdens across the board and created an enormous growth. If you look at U.S. growth versus the EU for the 4 years prior to that, to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they moved right together. Bum, 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 bum. The second you get into the fourth quarter of 2017, which was when the tax cut actually began, was the fourth quarter. If you look at the next 2 years period from fourth quarter 17 through third quarter 19, you see the U.S. really wildly outperforming the EU. In fact, the GDP at the end of that 2-year period, U.S. GDP was 2.5% higher than it would have been had we grown at the U.S. rate. So that's where I think that tax bill was really very well focused on across the board.
Okay, next question. Okay.
Hi, James Higgins, New Vernon Capital, the Monday meeting, et cetera. Question, Steve, you mentioned the priority of things that promote growth. We've all heard about the limited amount of time that Trump has in practice. Very true. What are the 2 or 3 biggest impediments to growth that can be cleared out of the way? And with more specificity than just like regulation. We know regulation.
That's a great question. Let me go out first on that, because one of my heroes, other than Arthur Laffer, was Milton Friedman. I just love Milton. And I was blessed in my life because I've known so many great minds like Arthur and Milton. And I remember I used to have dinner with him about twice a year up in San Francisco. Remember he and Rose used to walk down the streets of San Francisco, and we'd have these groups. I think you attended several of those, Arthur. And I remember one of the last ones before he died, I asked him that exact question. I said, Milton, what are the 3 things that are most important for economic growth? Can you guess what he said?
Stable prices.
Yes, he said stable prices, free trade.
Free trade and low taxes.
And no, he did not
Low
say
spending.
that. He said, and I see, by the way, Lisa Nelson is here, who's the head of ALEC. Lisa, you do an amazing job running ALEC.
And can I say, I miss saying that Lisa has gotten transparency passed in the state of Ohio. Lisa, congratulations, Lisa.
So, no, the third was school choice for every single child in America. So that's what Milton Friedman says, but I wonder what you all say. We'll start with you, Senator Johnson.
Well, again, as somebody who'd been in the business world for 30 years, a complex tax code is disincentivizing. A complex regulatory environment is disincentivizing. Again, when you're in business, you want to concentrate on your products. You want to concentrate on new products and better products and cutting your costs. You don't want to have to worry about what the government is doing to you. So I would just say you could set entrepreneurs free. You could release the animal spirits by, again, a very simple and rational tax system and a lower regulatory burden. You don't do away with regulations. You need some, absolutely. We're not angels. But I would focus primarily on that.
Okay. Senator, I just would, this number that's out there today on inflation, this 2 that's deceptively correct. Because I can tell you, I'm still seeing 30, 40% price increases.
Yes.
I mean, those of us out there today, you talk about transparency, so try to get home insurance right now, for example, right? 20 to 30% up. Try to get, property tax where government comes in and says, well, we're not going to raise, we're not going to change the millage. But then they have this wholesale come in reappraisal. So we're all dying with increase in inflation rates out there today. We got to get spending and these rates down for affordability. And when you go and you say you're going to give, I'm all for labor making a fair living, particularly in this inflationary period. But when you get 40 to 60% wage increases, there's only 2 things that are going to happen. Prices are going to go up, jobs are going to be eliminated. AI is going to cause that kind of elimination. So we're in this death cycle right now, Senator, so we've got to do something, please.
Let me stable price is the most important thing. I mean, you literally could, as long as it's just stable.
Yeah.
And again, I agree with Milton Friedman on that. Stability. Volatility is the word. Again, there are some businesses, I guess, can thrive in volatility. Most people can't. So stability, but obviously low price. You'd rather have a little bit of inflation. Deflation is the worst, I think, right? But again,
no, you don't want any inflation.
Well,
you want stable prices like we had for 200
Yeah, you sure don't want deflation. And I think that's the problem with.
Well, what do the 3 of you think of cryptos and Bitcoin and that kind of thing? Are you in favor of them or against them?
Well, I wish I would have invested in them, but I still don't invest in them. No, and I can't get my son to either. So I mean, again, there's no value there. I agree with Warren Buffett. I'd rather buy something that produces wealth as opposed to a big old block of gold.
Well, you know, when you look at cryptocurrencies, they're just a response to the government control over money. I mean, you know, what I was going to say a second ago, if I may, is that, you know, starting prior to 1913, we had a private banking system, a private money system, a private monetary system in the U.S. We did. I mean, the government did define what a dollar was. It was 20 and 67 cents of an ounce of gold or 1 ounce of silver. That's true. The government also did have a minting process prior to 1913, but so did everyone else. You bring your bullion in, they mint it there. They charge a little commission. They were just, you know, it wasn't anything special. The only function the government really did have prior to 1913 was auditing banks' balance sheets to make sure that they were truthful and honest there. But all the money in the U.S. was come by banknotes, et cetera. That's where the money came from. And it had been this way for 250 years. And if you look at that 250-year period, you had literally zero total inflation over that whole period. Now, prices went up and down as they should, but there was no generalized inflation, starting in 1913 with the Fed, and then 1933 with the Bank Holiday Act, where we devalued the dollar against gold, and we confiscated all gold from everyone. And then we had the voluntary foreign credit restraint program, and the mandatory programs there. And then we had the Smithsonian Accord, and I was in the White House for most of these events. The price level is the government is now completely controls money, and we have an increase in the price level from 1913 to the present of 33-fold, 3,300% since then. You know, I don't see any reason why we can't go back to a privatized monetary system where the government defines what a dollar bill is and let the banking system take care of it. There's no reason why this has to be done. And Mundell and I have argued this forever and ever and ever, and the damn guy goes and dies on me. Now my favorite policy is anything that extends life beyond 84 years.
Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, Senator, I'm with you. I wish I would have invested, particularly since the new president coming in got a little bump the other day, didn't he, for everybody? But I guess I'm too old to think about the crypto thing, to be honest with you, Art. I'm in that.
But can you think of gold? Can you think of a dollar bill? What's the backing of a dollar bill? Nothing. What's the backing of gold? Maybe some jewelry. Right. I mean, there's nothing. Crypto, if you have a good money, the money, by creating the moneyness, creates the value itself. If it comes to be. But it has to come to be. And I don't know how you move from where we are with Bitcoin today, which is an investment, to a Bitcoin that is stable in value and has no investment. Yeah. That is the critical of going from a quantity rule to a price rule. And
so
you really have to go to that.
Isn't the value of something like Bitcoin, that, and you sort of hinted at this, that it keeps the central bankers honest, right? Because now you have an alternative to, fiat money by the government.
You should get rid of the central bankers in this. I mean, Powell doesn't know straight up from Sikkim. Right.
No.
Powell doesn't know straight up from Sikkim, and neither the Fed there. They're doing this interest rates, this and that and the other. If they knew what Volcker said, looked at spot commodity prices and decided how we do open market operations to change the monetary base of the balance sheet of the Fed. And if he saw spot commodity prices rising above where they should, he would sell bonds in the open market and contract the monetary base, and the other way when it went down. And that's what they did for 250 years on controlling the value of the dollar or the value of the pound in terms of currency. It's a very simple price rule, and it's very different from the quantity rule, and it works, and the quantity rule really doesn't work.
So the quantity rule is more monetarism, right?
Well, we all look to money in the system. What would you rather have, stable prices or stable quantities? If you want stable prices, you want to have a price rule. Yeah. If you want stable quantities, you have a quantity rule. And it's very simple. Now, what Milton argued all the time is if you have control of the quantity of money, ultimately prices will stabilize.
You know,
but why not just do it right away at the first and just stabilize prices?
I learned a good lesson from Steve Forbes, who's our brother in arms, and the bane of my existence, because I travel a lot, as all of us do, and I refuse to sit in middle seats anymore on airplanes. I just cannot stand it. Anyway, what does this have to do? So I asked Steve Forbes, do you have a strategy for this? And he said, look, if ever I'm stuck in a middle seat, I start talking to my seatmates about monetary policy, and it just clears out the whole row. So I saw some people yawning. Okay, next question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hello. My name is Tariq Zain. Maybe I don't have a direct question, but first of all, I was AT&T, a Lucent Technology employee, and also I was the president and CEO for telecom in Africa and Middle East. Just let me share you something. I think tomorrow, not only the United States, but the whole world will wake up with very, very bright future. And I came to this country back in 2000, me and my family. We used to vote Democrat. If you ask me why, I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I don't know. This year, myself and all my family, we voted for Trump and voted Republican. And when I talked to my wife and my kid, they said, when we used to go to the grocery, go to Costco, just we cannot afford it anymore. Also, number two, guess what? Back in 2000 or 1995, everybody remember Motorola, Lucent Technologies. Guess what? Today, United States, they don't have any kind of telecom suppliers. I was in Saudi Arabia back in 1993 after the Gulf War. In all Africa, Motorola
So what's
there.
the question?
Lucent was there. My question was, the Chinese, you talk about the tariff here. The Chinese, the user who they was like, they subsidize their products. I have with Senator Lindsey Graham before, they asked us as a CEO, how can we deal with the Chinese? I said, you cannot deal with them as long as they're subsidizing their products. Because myself, I had a chance before, like a $1 billion contract for Lucent or for Ericsson, I remember. The Chinese got it for 200 million. Guess what?
All
It's
right, we got it.
800 is being subsidized.
Okay,
So now President Trump talk about tariff here in the United States. What you're going to talk about, all the product of the United States outside is going to be
okay,
subsidized.
Got
by
it. Thank you. So I'm going to kind of summarize that because this is maybe we'll take one more question after this. But China policy, what is? And Bob, let me start with you because you've done business in China over the years. What would be the optimal U.S. policy towards China when it comes to our economy?
Well, a couple of things. The ones you talked about earlier today, I think these tariffs, if they're used as a tactic and not a policy, I think President Trump has proof positive that he's been able to use those effectively, right? Number one. Number two, China is just on a whole different scale. You know, we're spending tons of money for environmental, which we all are concerned about. When I was running Chrysler, you know, they came out with this CAFE standard, right? And let's remember, CAFE standard basically asked us to do things that were technologically, it's hard to schedule an invention, right? But we all did right voluntarily. And they ended up with an off-ramp. This administration and this president was part of that prior administration, comes out with these EV mandates. And, you know, you can't force, you cannot force a customer to buy something they don't want. I don't care how much you subsidize. Just look at the loss in the auto industry center, and I know you've talked a lot about this, but you got Ford canceled 2 plants that they were building for EV batteries. If you look at what happened at GM, $8.6 billion. They shut down the autonomous car, $10 billion. I mean, billions of dollars of wasted expense in that industry because of policy that was set by this administration. So I think in dealing with China, we need to be thinking about 2 things, onshore and reshore. Those are different. I've got 5 plants in Vietnam, and I'm getting inundated with requests for quotes for reshoring from China to a lower cost country. And onshoring, so that if we can get stability in our costs and our labor and so forth, Art, as you said, I think we can be very, very competitive with China. Very competitive.
Okay. I'm going to pass it over.
Okay. What do you think about China?
That's because it's a tough question. You have to deal with China based on the reality situation. First of all, I think it would be insane to go to war with China over Taiwan. It'd be insane. We don't have a chance, okay? So first recognize that reality, and then do whatever you can policy-wise to turn them into a friendly competitor, okay, as opposed to an enemy. I don't like being the drums of war. I'm concerned. You know, they obviously are. They have economic policies that bankrupt things like the steel industry, that type of thing. You know, how do you deal with that? I'd rather have the entire world try and band together to force them to follow the rules. It's an incredibly difficult situation right now. It just is. I mean, I think we opened up our World Trading Organization to them. We offered them all these benefits, and they took advantage of it, and we're going to have to dial that back.
Let me, if I can, all your points are correct, and you're very correct on this. I went to China in 1970 on Air Force Two with George Shultz and John Ehrlichman. We were the first to go with mainland China. We did the pre-negotiation for Kissinger's trip and then thereon. And as a staffer, I was in charge of mainland China for the economics, now not the military. If you look at China in 1970, I think it was 96% of all production went through state-run enterprises. Today it's down to 12%. That's called a tax cut. In 1992, China decided to peg the renminbi to the U.S. dollar, to Alan Greenspan, and prices go boom, just stabilize completely there. That's called sound money.
Yep.
And lastly, China went from no trade with anyone. They were the hermit kingdom to this massive amount of trade. They became a free trade nation. Tax cuts, sound money, and free trade, the three pillars of supply-side economics. Let me tell you what they did. If you look at real GDP per adult in China versus the U.S., I think from 1970 to 2023 or 2024, when I did the number last, Chinese real GDP per adult grew 33-fold. Ours grew 3.5-fold. You know, this is a supply-side miracle that is called China. Now, the problem I see now is Xi Jinping is not the old Chinese guard. Xi Jinping is bringing statism back as never before. I think all of you sitting here today worrying about China would be the same as le défi américain. If any of you remember the Japanese threat in 1989, Japanese market cap was the same as the U.S. market cap. Look at it today. Japan just disappeared from the face of the earth when they put on their huge across-the-board tax increases, value-added tax increases. It is, I think China's on a downspin, and just the less you mess around with them, the faster they go. Never stop an enemy when he's making a mistake. Well, and I think we've got, China is not our problem, and it will not be. They're going to be gone.
If you look at China, by the way, just to amplify your point, if you look at the market cap of all American companies, it's 20 times the market cap of all the Chinese companies. And you know, NVIDIA, just our top 7, are massively more profitable than their companies. So we're winning against China. I mean, in terms. I'm just saying in terms of. I'm not saying it's a growth. It's not a contest, but I'm just saying we are so much more prosperous than they are right now, and we have more innovation. And so, you don't agree with that, or?
Yeah, but Xi Jinping is worse than Biden.
Yeah,
and there's no way of getting him out. He's as bad in economics as any country leader I've ever seen. If you just leave him alone,
no, it's not going to work.
It's not working at all. Look at what's happening in China now. Look at the problems they're having, and it's just beginning. And there's no way that guy's going to let control go.
Okay, that's when they become more dangerous too. Again, you just
I don't think so. I thought that
it concerns me. I mean, what they're doing with all the militarism and building up that. Again, I think they become more dangerous. But again, I don't want to turn them into an enemy. I want to figure out some way to manage that relationship.
Well, I think we should suggest. I mean, I think the one thing the President of the United States should do is personally engage with the people we consider the most hostile nations on earth. I think Trump should go to talk with China. I think he should go and talk with Putin and with what is his name? Kim Jong-un, and with No, I was talking about Iran.
All right.
When I do
I'm going to bring up one more quick subject, and then we'll bring this to an end. I want to show you one more thing, and then get your reaction, and then we'll bring this to a halt. This is so this is the map of what the United States might look like, and I want your serious. By the way, I don't think we should call it Greenland anymore. It should be called Trumpland, right? But on a serious note, what do you all think? What do you think about the idea of the United States purchasing Greenland? I mean, we purchased, remember Seward's Folly when we purchased Alaska and we purchased at the Louisiana Purchase? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I understand this strategic importance of both Greenland and the Panama Canal. So, I know the mainstream media or legacy media is criticizing and ridiculing Trump for it. It's not insane buying stretch the imagination. So if we can do a good deal with Greenland, I'd be totally supportive of it. And I think we need to reassert, some control over Panama.
Over the Panama Canal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That was the stupidest thing that Carter did. Like, no offense to the dearly departed, but that was just dumb.
Arthur?
I think Trump should do all he can to secure America, military security, and having them control the Panama Canal is just not acceptable.
Right.
And we have the military bases.
How many agree with that? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Sam Hayakawa put it beautifully. He said, "We stole it fair and square."
Again, this is just another excellent Trump negotiating skill. We're going to buy it, but if you let me do a defense system up there, he's going to be just as happy. And if I, one idea would be I'll trade California for Greenland.
First of all,
you really need anything for California? Just give it away.
Senator Johnson, thank you for being here. Arthur Laffer, you're a superstar. Barbara Nardelli, thank you so much. And have a great Inauguration Day tomorrow. It's morning in America!